everyone. I'm Aarti from Swydo, and today we have with us SEO expert and speaker Nitin Manchanda. Welcome, Nitin, and thank you so much for joining us and taking the time to speak with us today. And before we dive into the technical aspects, for our audience new to the world of SEO, could you please introduce yourself? Tell us about what you do, where are you based, and yeah, what made you fall in love with SEO in the first place?
Yeah, thank you, Aarti, for having me here. Really excited, and yes, was looking forward to this conversation for a long time. And yes, I'm Nitin Manchanda. Have been practicing SEO for a bit more than 12 years now. Right now, I'm running my own SEO consultancy. It's called Botpresso because of my love for crawling bots and espresso, everything else we have. And yes, prior to this, I was working for this company called Omeo, which is a travel tech based in Berlin. And even before that, I was working for Trivago as the global head of SEO. It was a fun
Mhm.
journey, learned a lot, and then I decided to start Botpresso to help other brands and yeah, not spending my time in internal bureaucracy. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's who I am, and have been hosting webinars for SEMrush, SE ranking, and so on for quite some time. Have hosted more than 50 webinars, which I'm really proud of. Never thought I would reach there, but yeah, super glad now. And I live in Berlin. It's been
Mhm.
8 years. I'm living in Germany now. So yeah, that's who I am.
Beautiful. So today we'll be talking to Nitin about building SEO that lasts in 2025. So Nitin, you've been in SEO since 2013. What's the biggest change you've seen in how people search, and how has this shaped the way you work with clients at Botpresso?
Yeah. Well, since I started SEO, I think it has always been changing, right? You know how SEO works, right? It's always
Yeah.
changing. If you talk about SERP, there are new things, Google experimenting every now and then. There are a lot of things
Hmm.
coming. I would call them distractions as well from an SEO perspective, right?
Yeah.
Which are taking away the CTR as well, right? So
Hmm.
something which was ranking number one, getting 15% of the CTR, three
Yeah.
months later, you would see, hey, my CTR dropped to 5%. It is still ranking number one. That's because of everything that Google is trying to help the users. So yes, that has been happening a lot, but lately, since all these LLMs, which are announced and people have started using that, myself included, I think there is massive change in how users search, right? So
Hmm.
previously, for example, if you're planning a trip to Paris, you would just go to Google, you would say, Paris weekend getaways or weekend trips,
Yeah.
weekend tips, right? So you would start with that, and then you would have basically multiple search queries to get you to what you want to achieve. But
Yeah.
now you're expecting that one final outcome which is helping you plan your itinerary. So you'll go there, you'll say, hey, I'm planning to go to Paris for a weekend with my family, and I want to explore the famous things to do, and
Yeah.
yeah, also some unique things as well which can be done with family. So you would give like more organized prompt to get an answer which is giving you final itinerary. So I think now the searches, the way user thinks about it, the way they're executing it, it has changed completely. It is not that 2 word 3 word searches anymore, especially for
Hmm.
information intent content, but it is
Hmm.
more detailed where they want to understand what LLM gets them. So they treat it like their assistant, personal assistant, where they give all the
Right.
information and they expect one reply which is perfect. Yeah,
Right.
I think that is something which has been changing a lot, and because of that, there are a lot of changes in SERP layout as well, right, which will
Hmm.
keep coming. And yes, I think this is the biggest change, and how we are helping at Botpresso our clients. So yes, I think we are still following the practices, the good practices. We believe in complete white hat. We don't do any gray hat, black hat. So we are continuing with that, focusing on the foundational, the tech SEO elements there, right, to make sure when crawler comes, we are able to welcome them with good experience, which is content accessibility, the how
Yeah.
the content is structured, all of that, and making sure that they are able to crawl the right pages, which is uh, crawlability and indexability of the website. So have been following those practices, and
Mhm.
recently we have also started running some experiments to see how LLMs are able to crawl our content and give us the outcome that we are looking for in this world. So yeah, I would say
Right.
it's just the beginning when it comes to LLMs in particular, but yes, very happy with the results so far, and I'm sure like we will keep learning, keep adopting,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
keep growing.
Yeah, that actually brings me to a very interesting next question, which is what actually working for your clients with these AI changes happening? I'm curious, how do you keep things feeling real and authentic while you're still optimizing for AI?
Yeah, well, a lot of things. So first of all, I think when we talk about optimizing content or a website for LLMs, I think what's important is understanding the basics. So
Right.
LLMs, like if you talk about OpenAI, essentially, like there were some, I'm not sure, rumors or reality that they're using Bing, right? If they're
Yeah.
using Bing, we need to make sure the content is easily accessible, right? You can't just rely
Mm-hmm.
on JavaScript heavily, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even Google, they can understand JavaScript. They can crawl your content whether when it's dependent on JavaScript as well.
Mm-hmm.
But that means they're investing more resources to understand your content, which is wasted of your crawl budget, right? So now in case of LLMs, you want to make sure that even without JavaScript dependency, they're able to see your content, able to understand, digest, and rank your content so that they can,
Mm-hmm.
show it when someone is searching for relevant queries, right? So that's very important. So fixing the basics, which is making your content, accessible, your site super fast, so that when they're coming, they're not fed up while trying to understand the content. So that is super super important. Another thing is understanding the user intent. As I mentioned, now users are searching for more, like they are giving you more detailed, more organized search queries than 2 3 words of search queries, right?
Right.
So thinking about that intent, what a user would be looking for, and structuring your content accordingly, I think that is very very important from a content strategy perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Additionally, what you can also do is schema markup. We all know, talk about any web page, it is very unstructured information for any bot. So you're relying on Google or other search engines that they would come, crawl the content and understand everything about the landing page. But that
Right.
doesn't happen always, right? So you can help
Mm-hmm.
them by implementing schema markup, so that you can say, hey, this is a blog page, here's my title, this was published on this particular date, this is what the content is all about, right? It was
Mm-hmm.
written by author, for example, Arti, and here are
Yeah.
some credentials about Arti. When you give this information in a structured way, that makes everyone's life super easy to understand. And when I'm saying everyone, I'm talking about crawling bots here, because
Yeah.
users will be able to, of course, see and understand the content.
Right. Which brings me to a very curious question that everyone's talking about: zero click searches. So,
Mhm.
what's your take on this, and what's working to keep people actually engaging with content, considering, yeah, all the changes we see?
Well, I love it because, of course, I mean, if you talk about numbers, right? That hey, I was getting 10,000 visits a day previously. Now I'm getting just 8,000 or 6,000, right? You would
Mhm.
definitely lose some visits, but these are mostly zero click, where a user is coming to a website just to understand something, and that's it. They're not
Right.
converting. So now you are able to help the users, and at the same time, it's not like they're just reading and going away. They would read
Mm-hmm.
it, and if your brand name is also mentioned with that, right, they would be able to read the brand name as well, right? So brand recognition definitely helps sooner, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
whenever in their journey. So yes, I think a zero click is very important. And as a user as well, I love it when I'm searching for something which doesn't need any clicking somewhere and going to a landing page just to get tiny information, which I used to hate. But now I'm like, okay, I just have to search for it. I get the information there, and that's it. So I
Right.
love it as a user, right? And I think it makes total sense whenever we
Mm-hmm.
talk about reducing the journey of a user finding some information. From a user experience perspective, it's perfect, right? And from SEO perspective as well, it's pretty good, because
Mm-hmm.
we are not getting users on a website who are just looking for some information. For example, if I was searching for iPhone 16 price online, right?
Mm-hmm.
I would click on a website, would go there, see the price, and then I bounce off. But now if you see your metrics, you would say, hey, 50% of my users are bouncing off within 10 seconds, right?
Right.
You would try to think about, okay, why would that happen? Maybe I don't have good content. Maybe the content was not readable or whatnot, right? But the
Mm-hmm.
reality is these users were looking for price only.
Right.
But now, when you're saying, hey, you're talking about price, here you go, right? You got the information right there. And when the
Mm-hmm.
user has this intention of converting or going, more deeper in the funnel, maybe in the consideration phase, right? They would click on it, they would check the product details, and they would decide whether they want to get it or not. And that is when they're spending more time, they're engaging with the content, they're also checking reviews, ratings, and all of that. And then
Right.
essentially they would convert. So you would say, hey, even if the number of sessions I was getting before was 10,000, which is now reduced to 6,000, I am seeing increase in my conversion, right? Or even if it's not increased, but it is at the same level, which means
Mm-hmm.
you're essentially happy that your dollar numbers, which you care the most about, they're not changing.
Yeah. So it's more quality than quantity in a
Yes,
way.
exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Perfect. So if we get down to the nuts and bolts, what technical stuff do you see really move the needle with rankings?
What technical stuff? Oh, that's a good question, right? And I think when we talk about technical SEO, right,
Mm-hmm.
that is something which is also expertise of us here at Botpresso. So there are a lot of things. Right? I'm a big fan of internal linking. I know it
Mm-hmm.
works like magic, especially for enterprise level brands, right? I've worked on like a lot of brands and built a lot of case studies where we took them from nowhere to somewhere we could celebrate together, right? So I have a lot of case studies on my website as well. You can check, right? And it is a topic where there is no one solution. I love problem solving, right? So
Mm-hmm.
when I was working at Omeo, I joined and I spoke with the team that, hey, how's it going with internal linking? So they said, well, we have 50% coverage, which is pretty good for a website of this size. I was like, 50%, yeah, maybe not, right? So we started working on it. I took a look at the algorithms we had in place, which we built. They were rule based, basically, rule based algorithm. So I sat with the team, we optimized that, and then we were like, okay, this looks pretty good, let's go live with this. And now the coverage was 60%. When I'm saying coverage, it's like how many pages are covered through internal linking, right?
Yeah.
We were at 60%. Wow, 10% jump, awesome, right? Are we settling it here? No, right? So then we were like, okay, now we covered some more cases, let's sit again and see what is the difference. So we
Mm-hmm.
looked at the 40% set that we had, right? So we further added some edge cases to cover most of them. And now we were at 74%, I think it was something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we were happy. We were like, okay, this is perfect. Let's stop here. I was like, no, I'm not stopping here, right? And then we sat together and then we were discussing about the core problem as well. We were like, hey, if we go by rule based and let's say we're covering Paris to Barcelona, well, Barcelona is a popular city. Paris is a popular city. We can
Right.
cover them with any route. However, if you talk about, a little island, maybe a Spanish island, or let's say if you talk about Latam, right? How would we cover, Paris with an island which is in North or South America, right? We won't be able to cover them logically, or even if we cover, it will be like multiple hubs. So how do we fix that? So then
Mm-hmm.
we sat down, we basically decided to go back to the drawing board, and we were like, okay, look, here we're talking about A to B, B to C, and then we have some uh, you know vertices which are not covered. So we were like, okay, we're talking about graph theory. So we sat down, we basically thought about how we can solve this with graph theory, and we built an algorithm from scratch, and
Mm-hmm.
we did some like analysis on that. And now we were very happy with the first outcome. We were like, let's implement that. So we did that. And now this was on staging because we wanted to test it thoroughly. I was really happy about how contextually we were linking everything now on the website. And when it comes to coverage, we were at 97%.
Wow.
And I was super amazed. And team was like, this is ultimate win. I was like, okay, we still have 3% to cover, right? So we sat down together and there were some cases which were logically not making sense, but we
Mm-hmm.
somehow wanted to cover them because we wanted to cover 100% of the website, right? That was the goal. So we sat down, we added some edge cases, which were not 100% contextual, but still we tried to find some relevance. For example, let's say you're going from Paris to Barcelona, that is already covered, right? But Paris to something which is near Barcelona, let's say
Mm-hmm.
Mallorca, right?
Yeah.
So we Mallorca is still not a good example, right? Because it's pretty popular. But let's say something which is a nice small island near Barcelona. So we were saying, and we wanted to cover our ferries as well. So we said, okay, let's on this landing page, we can say you can take your flight from Paris to Barcelona. And how about continuing your journey with ferry? So we have
Mm-hmm.
connection from Barcelona to that tiny island, right? So we did that. So now what we were doing was on the Paris page as well, which was pretty popular. We were talking about that tiny island, right? So we added
Right.
these edge cases, and now we were at 99%. So I think now, sorry, I think I went too deep into
No,
it.
it makes sense.
Right?
It's giving me a lot of questions I'm going to ask you next. So it's
Yeah,
great.
definitely. So here the point was understanding the core and setting the right foundation plays a big role for from tech SEO perspective, especially for enterprise SEO, right? And
Right.
then you talk about content accessibility, you talk about core web vitals, you talk about how the content is structured, and then of course, if you talk about programmatic SEO, which is
Mm-hmm.
like the automation way of producing content, keeping the quality very high, right? That also plays a huge role. So I
Mm-hmm.
think all of these together. So I unfortunately cannot name like any specific because it really depends on what exactly a domain is
Yeah.
struggling with, right? But I think all of these together play a huge role in setting the foundation, and without this, you cannot uh, grow, or yeah, you cannot grow basically an enterprise level brand.
Right. So for someone who's just getting started, what would be your top three things to do? Like, what should they focus on when it comes to technical stuff? The top three to even like hit off, because there are so many pieces of the puzzle that need to come together. But what are the first three things that they should keep in mind before they even look into the big picture?
Got it. Well, I think the number one thing would be content accessibility. So I've
Right.
seen brands which spend a lot of time on content production and like creating a lot of new pages and all of that. But when it comes to content, uh, crawling or understanding accessibility of the content, they fail, right? And then they
Hmm.
ask questions like, hey, we are doing everything right? It's just tiny thing which is causing the problems. We are client side rendering, right? So that is a big problem. So I would say make sure when a crawler is coming to your website, right, you are doing the right things, right? That is about understanding the content. If I go one step back, I would say crawlability is also a big piece, right? I have been working with brands which are massive in size, millions of landing pages. But when you ask them, when did you last generate your XML sitemap? They would say, well, it's been 2 years, right? Which means everything that they launch in last 2 years is not part of your XML sitemap. Or maybe there are a lot
Hmm.
of pages which are part of XML sitemap. They are not, alive anymore. So they are either throwing 404, like, or 410 whatnot, right? Or they are redirecting to some other pages, which is again
Hmm.
waste of crawl budget, right? At the same time, you're also not sharing, not helping search engine bots with the pages that you have in your system, right? So solving this is another thing that you should be looking at as the first thing. So yeah,
Hmm.
now I've covered like a crawling of those pages and then understanding the content. So I think if you start with these two, they're pretty good, right? But
Right.
as you asked me about three things, I would say core web vitals, right?
Yeah.
It's a topic, which is full of debate all the time, right?
Yeah.
Because yeah, I mean, Google announced that it is going to be biggest, one of the big ranking factors, but I'm not sure about whether it's really ranking factor from an SEO perspective.
Hmm.
But from a experience perspective, it is definitely very important. And also, if your pages are loading faster, right, you are also not wasting your crawl budget. So indirectly from an SEO perspective as well, it is very, very important. So I think these
Hmm.
three things you can get started with. They are very technical in nature, and you can't just say that today I'll start working on them and tomorrow
Yeah.
I'll be ready, I will be
Glorious.
convinced
Yeah.
of it, right? That will not happen. I'm still a learner, right, after 12 years of experience. And yes, I think just keep this hunger of learning and keep exploring.
Yeah. Great one. So, talking about core web vitals, it's a bit of a headache for smaller teams, right? So, what's your go-to approach for tackling these for like teams that may not be as big in size?
Mhm. Yeah, well, it really depends on the tech stack, first of all, right? And I think in a lot of cases, even if you start with page speed insights or
Hmm.
webpagetest.org, like the tools which are pretty popular for understanding how your website is doing from performance perspective, I think that's a great start, right? There you can run your test in lab environment to understand what is happening, and when you make some changes, you see how those changes are improving the performance of your landing pages. Because when you see this data in Google, where you see not lab data, right, but
Hmm.
data from actual users, right? So that is aggregated for last 28 days in Google Search Console. That takes time. So you don't want to wait for 28 days to see what is improving, what not, right? So I would say, yeah, you start with lab test and start improving things that you see there, and you get really good recommendations there as well. For example, you would see your images, are, for example, there is an image which is 2 MB. You can
Hmm.
reduce this to 200 KB. Well, that is 90% reduction. And this is one image. If you have 10 of those such images on a landing page, that's a huge reduction, right? So you
Right.
can start there. And we have also seen a lot of improvements just following the basics. So core web vital is a very heavy topic, and I would not recommend like spending all your money, all your efforts, all your resources on optimizing from 95 to 100, right?
Right.
So even if you're fixing the basic, right, so
Hmm.
from basically, if you're, for example, right now at 30, from there to 80, 85 is a comparatively an easier journey than from 85 to 99 or 100, because then you're talking about, okay, where my servers are located, what kind of servers I have, optimizing all
Hmm.
of that, which is generally like the most expensive thing in core web vital optimization. So I would say focus on that. once you're from from 30 to 85, 90, that is already a good achievement. After that, you can
Right.
decide whether you really want to go from 90 to 100, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or you think that is going to be really expensive and I would have to put two resources for 6 months only working on that, right?
Right.
You don't want to change your data centers and everything, right? So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I think that is something I've seen people just going crazy about, that okay, we are at 90, how can we go to 100? Do you really need to go there, right? It is about
Yeah.
solving user experience. And if your page is loading in 2 seconds, that is good time. I, as a user, I'm very impatient, right? But still, I think 2 seconds, I would take that.
Yeah. Okay. So when we talk about results and metrics, when it comes to showing clients that SEO is actually working, what's your
Mhm.
approach? How do you connect these SEO efforts to actual revenue? Because sometimes you hear that it takes like 6 months to even see something. And then it's
Mhm.
usually it depends. So how do you bridge that gap? How are you connecting the SEO efforts to actual revenue?
Yeah. Well, it depends. Yeah. So first of all, great question, right? I get this question every single day whenever we're talking to any new
Yeah.
clients or existing clients, right? They ask these questions about reporting.
Hmm.
So we have a detailed reporting, and what I prefer, I'll talk about reporting a bit as well,
Yeah.
right? First of all, when we send our reporting, our reports, monthly performance reports to our clients, what we do is we start with a very crisp executive summary that
Hmm.
in SEO last month versus the month before, we did this much, these many organic clicks, branded, non-branded, right, and the revenue increased. We assume
Hmm.
that someone who only has 30 seconds is able to understand how SEO is performing at a very high level.
Yeah.
And then when you scroll down, you see more details, country by split, branded, non-branded, and what kind of pages are working well for us, what kind of pages are not
Hmm.
working well, right? So this is for, let's say, directors, VPs who do not have just 30 seconds to understand it, right? But
Hmm.
maybe 2 minutes, maybe 3 minutes. If you scroll further down, right, we have a section which is more for managers, where they get
Hmm.
more details, right? What exactly we worked on in the last month, what is the plan, high level theme that we have for the next month, right? And all of that, right?
Hmm.
More details, like how many keywords
Yeah.
we're ranking for, how many keywords we're ranking for now, how we're
Hmm.
improving, what is not working, what is working, and all of that. And then in the bottom, we will also have a link to, let's say, Looker Studio report, or some other, let's say, Google Sheets, or whatever report, right?
Hmm.
You click on that, and it takes you to a more detailed report where you can see all of those keywords, everything, like all the tracker, what we're working on, who's working on those items, and all of that.
Hmm.
So this is how we do reporting, which is pretty like inclusive. Everyone is happy about, right? And about how we map these KPIs with the projects we're working on. So yeah,
Hmm.
well, so one thing we need to understand as SEOs is whatever we're working on, we should not be directly mapping it with SEO like traffic or revenue,
Right.
right? Of course, our end goal is to achieve that, but
Hmm.
sometimes we're working on something. There are some immediate KPIs that you're affecting. For example, let's say I'm working on content and I got
Hmm.
an approval for 100,000 euros, right? Now, if I got that approval, my management would be asking, hey, 100,000 euros is good money, right?
Hmm.
Where are you spending it? What is it bringing for the business? If I say, well, we will be working on it and it's going to increase our traffic and revenue, right, by X%, Y%, that is not 100% correct, I would say. My end goal is that, but I should also be able to communicate the KPIs which are in the process. For example, if I'm working on content, my goal is to rank better for the keywords we are already ranking. Second,
Right.
rank for more keywords, because I'm writing content. I would also think about covering more intent, right?
Hmm.
Different new entities which I'm not covering right now, but I would want to cover because I deserve to cover, rank for those keywords
Hmm.
or entities. Right. So I think these KPIs, for example, if you talk about just these two KPIs, they're pretty good. They tell how my content is performing. If I'm improving
Hmm.
on ranking, so the keywords I was already ranking, I'm happy. If I'm ranking for more keywords, even more happier, right?
Yeah.
And then I could say, okay, well, if I'm ranking for more keywords and ranking better for existing keywords, definitely I'm gonna get more traffic, unless Google is
Hmm.
more surprises and pushing my results down and
Yeah.
decreasing my CTR by half. That's a
Hmm.
different story. But yeah, these are the KPIs that I would be sharing in this case. And in fact, every project that we share with our clients, right, in the recommendation itself, we talk about what KPIs we are looking at and how we
Hmm.
would be measuring them. So this
Right.
also gives confidence to people who are working on it. They don't have to always look at, SEO traffic, SEO revenue, because that is affected by 100 other parameters. And out of these 100 parameters, you are probably controlling just five, because you have your competitors. They're always, working on new things, right? They're also in the game. So their
Mm-hmm.
performance is also affecting your performance. Google is always experimenting new stuff, right? But is that, like, if you're not performing, maybe because Google launched something, right? Should you be like unhappy about it? Maybe not, right? So looking at your KPIs in a nutshell is probably, in isolation, right, is probably not the best option. So you also look at how you're doing against the competition, against the market. So we look at those KPIs as well. Yeah.
Collectively, yeah.
Yeah.
And are you using any specific tools, or are there any? What does your reporting tech stack look like?
Yeah, well, it really depends on what our clients want, because sometimes
Mm-hmm.
they want like, hey, we do not want anything fancy. Even Lucas Studio won't work for us. Give us very simple reports in a table in Google Sheets. We're like, okay, perfect. We do that,
Oh.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they say, well, yeah, Lucas Studio is pretty good, and we have been using that for other marketing channels as well. So let's go ahead with
Mm-hmm.
that. So we do that as well. So it's
All right.
mostly, I think, these two, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's mostly these two, I would say.
All right. So if I would say, beyond the usual metrics that everyone's talking now, with AI being everywhere, are there any new signals that you're keeping an eye on when it comes to your reporting metrics?
uh, so you're asking specifically for AI, right? With the in this
Yeah.
area, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think we can, of course, I mean, all this data is already available in Google Analytics, right? So like how much traffic you're generating from LLMs and all of that. So
Mm-hmm.
do that. And again, I mean, we have a connector. I mean, not we, like we use a connector, which is for Google Analytics and Looker. So we just pull these details there. And
Mm-hmm.
because we have this data in Google Analytics, and if our clients prefer Google Sheets uh, reports, right, it's easy to just take an export, move it there, and we have the data ready. Yeah.
Right.
So we are not doing anything, like super magical,
Mm-hmm.
it's, not the traditional tech
Mm-hmm.
stack reporting. Yeah, but this is what we do.
Yeah. So looking ahead at where things are headed, so what would be your one SEO strategy that you think is absolutely crucial for 2025 that people shouldn't look away
Yeah.
from?
Yeah. I think what is very, very important in today's era is not jumping to execution straight away. Just doing your analysis and understanding, what your user is looking for. And
Mm-hmm.
once you know this, I think there is a lot that depends on that. From your content strategy perspective. So
Right.
that would be my number one advice, that do not just jump to execution whenever you're working on any project, right? Think
Mm-hmm.
about what they want. Think about what the problems are, right? And
Mm-hmm.
once you know the problem statement, right, then you can think about the solution. So in
Right.
solution, there can be multiple things. Once you, for example, if you know that, hey, I'm working on this website and I know for a fact their hygiene or foundation is really bad. So of course you would focus on that, right? But you
Mm-hmm.
also need to understand what your users are looking for. And if
Mm-hmm.
you are, for example, just optimizing for LLMs for a brand which is very transaction heavy, right? I'm not sure how useful that would be, because you are optimizing for something, you're just, following others, that, hey, everyone is going behind LLMs. Now, Google is also less than 90% market share in the US, right? That
Yeah.
means LLM is a big thing, right? I don't want to miss the train, right?
Mm-hmm.
But is that really important for you? Maybe that train is not taking you to your destination. So
Yeah.
you also have to think about that. And yeah, think about your users, and then, yeah, think about your strategy. And also, I would add one more thing, which is very much related, right? That is, SEO is not only about SEO these days, like we used to do, for example, 10, 15 years back, right?
Mm-hmm.
It has changed a lot. And now it's time to wear your growth hat all the time and think about how you can make your user happy from their first experience, which is, how you are present on SERP, to
Right.
second, which is when how you're welcoming them on a website, and from there on how you take them from there to conversion. So it's about
Mm-hmm.
thinking about the whole funnel, because your
Mm-hmm.
goal is not only generating traffic, but essentially you want to convert that traffic dollar value that everyone talks about.
Mm-hmm. Brilliant. Which brings me to my next question, which is more about, you said don't directly focus on the execution. How do you bring teams together? Like you're an
Mhm.
agency, but you've also worked with companies where you're dealing with multiple departments who directly or indirectly are responsible for your end goal.
Mhm.
How does everything work in momentum and in sync in this day and age?
Yeah, again, lovely question, right? I think when we talk about soft skills, right, we they are like undersell, right? And I think they should be given the priority or the value that they deserve. So
Hmm.
communication plays a huge role, right? And when you're talking to your team that, hey, we are working on SEO, these are the projects you're working on, and you're just talking about that, I don't think that's healthy, because you should
Right.
also be able to communicate why you're working on something and what is their role to achieve what they want to achieve together, right?
Hmm.
And when they execute something, I'm talking about developers because that is the most friction part, right? So when you're working with them, right, if you just say, hey, we have to implement this, right, they would implement that and then you will disappear. Yeah,
Hmm.
right. And then he'll come back again with a new request. I don't think
Right.
we should be doing that, right? We should be respecting them. They are also human being. They also are working on something, even though it's like their core responsibility. But when you tell them what they implemented and the impact of that, I think they would be very happy. And when we talk about communication, right, we also need to understand different communication style.
Right.
So sometimes when we marketers speak with developers, right, maybe they're not that analytical in nature. We are, because we are marketers, we talk about numbers, right?
Hmm.
We need to understand the kind of person we are speaking with. Maybe it's someone who loves to talk about what they did over the weekend, right?
Hmm.
Before talking about what is the plan for this week, right? So just try to understand the communication style of people, what they like, what they do not, right? And there are people who would not prefer talking about the weekend, and they would say hey, let's talk about numbers, right? So if you're asking how was your weekend, they would not like it. They would also always be thinking about, okay, let's jump to the topic now. So
Yeah.
you need to understand people, you need to understand the time they're investing in the conversation that they're having with you or planning or whatnot, right?
Hmm.
And I think connecting with them at their level and then executing things together so that they don't feel like they are isolated in this journey but they're together part of it, I think that
Yeah.
plays a huge role. And yes, I think like time to time partying with them or chilling and just talking about random stuff as well, that is also very important, because by doing this you're building a relationship, right?
Right.
That brings authenticity, trust, and this collaborative approach, which is very
Hmm.
important in SEO, because SEO is not like just your marketing team can, for example, execute, or your tech team can execute. It
Right.
is a pure cross-functional function, right? So you really need to work with developers, product managers, designers, uh, QAs, marketers,
Yeah.
data analysts, and all of them. Yeah, so be friends with everyone, and for that I think communication plays a huge role along with many other soft skills.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Okay. So my last question before we wrap up: what's your biggest piece of advice for building SEO that lasts in 2025?
Yeah, so I would just repeat the part that you need to understand your user better, right? So whatever you're working on, users should be sitting in the center of your strategy. If you're optimizing or building things for users, right, that is going to, yeah, stay with you forever, right? Not just in 2025, but yeah, if you're just thinking about pleasing search engine bots, sorry, that time is gone, right? You can't please. Well, take a look at the brands, right? So I was reading an article this morning which is about
Hmm.
all the bigger brands in SEO industry, right? Href, for example, was the biggest winner. It's a huge brand, right?
Yeah.
But out of 11 brands, this guy analyzed, right? There were 7 brands which dropped visibility in last year. However, if you talk about smaller brands, out of I think 12 brands he analyzed, 8 brands gain visibility. So it
Hmm.
doesn't matter whether you're a big brand or a small brand. If you're doing right things at right time for the right audience, right, you are going to win. So think about your user, where your user deserves to sit, right, and execute, and yeah, enjoy your SEO success.
Brilliant. That was fantastic, Nitin. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you sharing all these insights with us today. If you would like to learn more about Nitin's work, you can find him on botpresso.com. And where else can our audience reach you if they have any questions? I'm sure they do tons.
Yeah, happy to answer any questions the audience would have here. So yeah, you can catch me on LinkedIn. You can just search for my name. You'll see this, handsome face, and we can connect there. And you can ask me any questions there. You can also catch me on X, which I'm not using very regularly these days,
Hmm.
but LinkedIn
Hmm.
is definitely the place where you can catch me with the questions.
Brilliant. Okay. Thank you so much again, Nitin.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Likewise.